Revealed. 6 spine-chilling night shift tales from doctors haunted by Sinister. Unexplained terrors. Dr. Sarah Carter glanced at the clock. Midnight. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead like lightning bugs caught in a cruel joke, casting ghostly shadows on the peeling walls of St. Benedict's Hospital, a once glorious healthcare institution, now drowning in despair. Rumors swirled of the whispers that filled its dark corners, and as she settled into the dimly lit break room with 5 other doctors, the weight of the air felt electric. The lingering scent of antiseptic clenched at her throat, fighting against the nauseating dread settling in her stomach. "Tell us something spooky, Sarah," Dr. Malik prodded, desperation lining his voice. His eyes darted around, reflecting a fear that had settled among them like a thick fog. Sarah hesitated. Glancing at the others, she felt the familiar chill creeping in. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was left alone in the pediatric ward a few nights ago, just me and a feverish kid. I treated him, but while I was jotting down notes, I heard whispers. Soft at first, but then they grew strong, wrapping around me like ice." She paused, her breath hitching as the memory clawed back to life. "I went back to check, but when I got there, nothing. All the beds were empty. No sign of my patients'." Skepticism mixed with fear painted their faces. "That's just sleep deprivation," Dr. Lee interjected, rolling his eyes. "You're all just tired." "No," Dr. Malik shot back. "I've seen things too. I swear. I had a kid come in pale as death with this wild look in his eye. I blinked, and he was gone. I swear I've seen him again, flickering at the corner of my vision while I'm working, like he's trapped here." The shadows around them deepened ominously, flickering equipment buzzing with a life of its own. A tense silence consumed the room, making every pulse feel heavy. The break room door creaked, sending a tremor through Sarah's bones, while the air grew thicker with every reluctant confessional. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let us continue as that tingle of tension faded. Dr. Malik leaned in, eyes wide. "Look, we can't ignore it. Patients show up, no paperwork. Just appear. It's like we're being tested or watched. Something sinister is happening here at St. Benedict's." The others nodded slowly, the realization wrapping around them like a cold embrace. But just then, the emergency room doors burst open, rattling against the walls. A figure stumbled in, drenched in sweat. At first glance, Sarah felt a rush of familiarity, then horror as it registered a child she treated before, eyes glistening with a darkness unknown. "Help me," the figure croaked, its voice warped, chilling Sarah to her core. Heart racing, she froze while her colleagues stared in disbelief. She could feel the pulse of shadows gathering, a waiting darkness that had settled within the very walls of the hospital. A single thought lodged in her brain. What if their fears were real? What if the whispers were not just a figment of exhaustion? As she stood rooted, doubt and terror began to surge. The facade of a caregiver crumbled, opening the door to the chilling truth: they might be fighting something lurking deeper than they ever imagined. Not just within themselves, but within the heart of St. Benedict's itself. And with dawn creeping ever closer, she couldn't help but wonder how many more innocent lives the hospital could sustain before its soul was corrupted beyond repair. The childish eyes, wide and pleading, drew Sarah in like a moth to a flame. She took a step forward, heart pounding, mind racing, trying to separate reality from the nightmare that gripped the hospital. Dr. Malik hesitated, his hands trembling slightly, while Dr. Lee uttered a strangled breath, breaking the silence. "Where did you come from?" Sarah asked, forcing calm into her voice. She needed something to latch onto, more than the dread that clouded the air. The child opened his mouth to speak, but all that emerged was a choked gasp. He stumbled forward, unsteady on his feet, And then Sarah noticed the shadows pooling around his feet like a dark veil, almost swallowing him whole. The break room light flickered again, as if struggling against a power it couldn't contain. Go back. His voice echoed, warping with terror. It knows. It wants you. With that, he collapsed and instinct kicked in. Sarah rushed to his side, but something held her back, a sense of wrongness, like a warning bell that echoed in her head. The others crowded close, their own fears reflected in their eyes. What does he mean? Dr. Malik whispered, his voice trembling. I don't know. Sarah snapped, her earlier calm obliterated. We have to help him. But as she reached out to touch him, the temperature dropped, and a frosty air clawed up her arms, causing her to recoil. The once innocent face of the child twisted into a mask of despair, a deep sadness that seemed to transcend life itself. Another whisper flickered through the space, unfurling like smoke, curling around her ears. Save your soul before it consumes you. Sarah's heart raced. The shadows coiled tighter, the weight of the air thickening. Just as panic threatened to erupt, the break room doors shook violently, a low growl emanating from beyond. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a frantic energy, growing dimmer with each flicker. Dr. Lee's confident facade shattered. This isn't real. It's not happening. He shouted, backing away from the child, who was now trying to crawl towards them, eyes wide with a haunting truth. A deep, dreadful silence fell upon the break room, punctuated only by the erratic hum of the lights overhead. Then they heard it, a soft scraping sound, like nails on porcelain, weaving in and out of their consciousness. Tickled the edges of reality, growing louder, more insistent. What is that? Dr. Malik breathed, voice quaking. Something's coming. Sarah realized, dread pooling in her gut. She took a deep breath and turned her gaze to the emergency room doors. They were trembling now, slamming against the walls as though something wanted in. No, we have to stay together, Sarah yelled, but as her words echoed, shadows twisted and wriggled, forming shapes that lurked just out of sight. The child gasped again. It's here. Suddenly, the lights flickered one last time and went out. Darkness swallowed the room, followed by the panicked gasps of her colleagues. The child's presence faded, swallowed by the void. Stay close, Sarah shouted, trying to steady her breathing. But then the scraping sound intensified, reverberating from all sides, drowning her out. Trapped in their own fears, the doctors clung to one another, the oppressive weight of the terror wrapping tighter around them. A single question rang out through the chaos. What were they really up against? As they fumbled in the abyss, desperate for anything that resembled hope, a whisper drifted through the darkness, now louder than ever. You should have listened. What lay beyond the doors? The question haunted each of them, a chilling reminder that the true horror might still be waiting, lurking in the shadows, eager to claim what was left of their sanity. The shadows pressed in, wrapping around Sarah and her colleagues like the oppressive weight of a heavy blanket. The scraping sound transformed into a guttural growl, rumbling deep and menacing from the other side of the door. Sarah's breathing quickened, the fear amplifying with each agonizing heartbeat. Dr. Malik, Dr. Lee, what do we do? Her voice cracked, barely holding onto the fraying thread of calm. We need to get out, Dr. Lee shouted, his earlier bravado evaporating. Find a way to. Another loud crash echoed through the break room, and the doors splintered, buckling under an unseen force. The lights buzzed back to life, flickering erratically, casting a grotesque dance of shadows across the walls. Help me! The child's voice from moments ago echoed in Sarah's mind, mixing with the low growl that now vibrated through their bones. Something was coming, and whatever it was growing impatient. Dr. Malik, heavy with fear, scanned the room for an escape route. The window. We can climb out, he urged, pointing toward a narrow glass barrier that separated them from oblivion. But before they could move, the scraping intensified, now a frantic scratching, like a creature clawing at the fabric of reality itself. The darkness beyond the door throbbed, alive with a malevolence that sent shivers racing down Sarah's spine. No, Dr. Lee screamed, backing away. Don't the child, the haunting image of the child. His whispers skirting the edges of her mind, illuminated each flicker of light. Had there been something in those eyes? A truth they couldn't grasp? Help him, Sarah. Help him. The plea rang in her head, desperation spiraling out, clawing at her resolve. But what if helping meant certain death? Then, from the swirling darkness beyond the door, a pair of eyes emerged, glowing, predatory, hungry. A deafening crash rattled the break room. The doors exploded inward, flinging splintered wood and metal shards across the room. "Run!" Sarah shouted, and in that moment primal instinct took hold. They surged toward the window, desperation fueling their every move. Dr. Malik reached the frame first, scrambling to push it open when the growl morphed into a deadly roar that rattled the walls. Panic seized Sarah. She felt the air thicken as she approached, her body urging her to flee, but something trapped her gaze. Deep in the shadows, a figure began to materialize, twisted and grotesque, with tendrils of darkness slithering from its form. "She'll join us, she'll serve," it hissed, its voice a cold echo, wrapping around her throat. "Sarah, please," Dr. Lee screamed, dragging her back as Dr. Malik fought against the stuck window. Desperation etched into his features. But there was no time. The figure lunged, fingers like talons extending toward her. Its sinister laughter echoed through the room, burying itself into her mind, paralyzing her with terror. "Don't look at it." Dr. Leah's voice cut through the fog of fear, snapping her back to sanity. But the creature's presence loomed, threatening to swallow her whole. Sarah broke free from her horrified trance, lunging for the window and frantically pulling at it. With one final shove, it gave way, a gasp of night air flooding into the room. "Go," she shouted, pushing Dr. Malik through the opening, the creature's breath hot on her back. One by one, they scrambled through, but as Sarah turned to follow, she felt an icy grip seize her wrist. She looked down, shadowy fingers clutching her, pulling her back. With a scream, she yanked free, the darkness all too eager to claim her. Gasping, she hurtled herself through the window just as the entity's roar filled the air, a sound of pure rage and hunger. The trio tumbled to the ground outside, breathless and disoriented. But a chill raced up Sarah's spine as she turned to look back. The break room was silent now, but the shadows outside writhed, and an echoing whisper followed them. "You'll never escape." They could hear the faint rumble of wheels on pavement. The solid night air turned oppressive again, and in the distance, an ambulance siren wailed a reminder of the nightmares that had no end. What had followed them into the night? The real horror had only just begun. Sarah's heart pounded like a drum against her ribcage as she pushed herself up from the ground, gasping for breath. The cold night air stung her skin, and every instinct screamed at her to run. She glanced at Dr. Malik and Dr. Lee, both still staring at the darkened break room window, minds racing with the horrors they had just escaped. Did we lose it?" Dr. Malik's voice trembled, his eyes wide. "I don't know," Sarah spat out, adrenaline still surging through her veins. "We can't stick around to find out. We have to move." As they scrambled to their feet, the ambulance siren wailed in the distance, a jarring sound that pulled Sarah's focus back to reality. The oppressive dread still clung to her, whispering memories, the childish voice, the grotesque figure, the feeling of icy fingers clutching at her. A chill shot down her spine as she realized they weren't entirely alone. The streets felt hollow, too quiet except for the distant sirens. The shadows seemed to stretch longer and darker around them, as if they were alive and deciding to engulf the trio once more. "Where are we going?" Dr. Leah's voice wavered, uncertainty creeping in. "Back to the hospital," Dr. Malik suggested hesitantly. "We can barricade ourselves until help arrives." "No," Sarah shot back. "It's not safe there. It knows we're back." Panic set in as Dr. Lee's eyes darted around, his breath quickening. "So what? We just run forever?" For just a moment, fear twisted into a sense of futility. How could they possibly outrun something that had followed them from that nightmarish realm? "To the police station," Sarah blurted out. "If we can reach the station, we can find help and answer." With a collective shudder, they set off down the empty street. The pavement felt alive beneath their feet, and with each step, the shadows seemed to creep closer, curling around their ankles like smoke. "Did you hear that?" Dr. Lee froze, his voice barely above a whisper. A raspy whisper rode the wind, threading through the air around them. "Help me." Sarah's stomach twisted as dread twisted deeper. "Keep moving. Don't look back." They picked up the pace, each echoing footfall filled with urgency. But the whispers grew louder, an insistent cry for help that twisted into something sinister, blending with laughter that resonated from nowhere. "We can't stop," Dr. Malik gasped, his voice thick with exhaustion. "Faster, faster." Sarah could feel something prowling behind them, watching, waiting for them to falter. She fought to keep her mind clear, repeating her mantra. Just reach the police. Just reach somewhere safe. A sudden blare of headlights cut through the darkness ahead, encapsulating them in harsh white light. An approaching vehicle. Relief flickered even as dread clawed back at her. "Stop." Sarah waved her arms. "Over here." The car slowed, coming to a halt and rolling the window down. "What are you doing out here?" The officer's face was a mix of confusion and concern. But before Sarah could respond, she saw it. Behind the officer's head, the shadows warped and twisted, forming that familiar grotesque figure, eyes gleaming with hunger. Sarah's scream bubbled up, but no sound escaped her. The officer's head snapped back, eyes wide as he caught sight of the thing. "Get back." But it was too late. A blinding flash erupted as the creature lunged, and in a heartbeat, the darkness swallowed everything, the screams tightening into a chilling silence. Sarah awoke to find herself alone, strewn across the pavement where the car had been, the air thick with smoke and shadows. Where is everyone?" She whimpered, rising to her feet, panic gripping her tightly. Suddenly, whispers began to swirl around her, growing louder, more overwhelming. "You must choose." What did that mean? Sarah's heart raced as she staggered back, trying to escape the cacophony that surrounded her. She felt eyes watching, creeping closer, and in the distance, a solitary child's voice called out, "Help me." She braced herself, the weight of fear pressing down again, drowning her in uncertainty. What would she have to sacrifice to uncover the truth? The shadows stirred around her, and she realized she was not alone. Could she face whatever she had awoken? Would she dare to confront the horror that lurked just beyond her perception? Sarah's mind raced with the implications of the whispers, the chilling words hanging in the air like a dense fog. Shadows twisted around her, each one bringing a sense of urgency and dread. She could almost feel the pulse of the night, beating in tune with her racing heart. "Help me." The child's voice was clearer now, tinged with desperation. It echoed, wrapping around her, seductive and dreadful all at once. "You must choose." Instinctively, Sarah took a step back. She wanted to scream, call out to her friends, but it felt like an eternity since they vanished. Were they caught in that dark flash too? The shadows flickered, revealing distorted faces that seemed to stare into her soul, each one trapped in a silent scream. She felt an overwhelming need to act. She couldn't remain a passive listener. She was being drawn in, like a moth to a flame. "Choose what?" she shouted into the suffocating darkness. The shadows shifted, looming larger, as if they were drawing energy from her fear. "What do you want from me?" Light, sudden and bright, cut through the darkness ahead. A dim streetlight flickered on, illuminating the cracked pavement. Sarah squinted against the brightness and saw a figure emerging. A small girl with tangled hair stood just beyond the light, her face smudged but eyes pleading. "Please," the girl whimpered. "You have to help me." Every instinct screamed at Sarah to flee, to ignore the haunting presence. But there was something familiar about the child's features. "Where are the others?" The child's mouth quivered as she pointed to the alley nearby. "They're trapped. They need you." The weight of decisions pressed down on Sarah, her pulse quickening at the thought of what she might have to face. Could she save them? What did it mean to choose? "Wait," she called as the girl began to retreat into the shadows. "Don't go." But the girl faded, the shadows enveloping her once more. Panic surged. Sarah squinted into the pitch-black alley where the child had gestured. Silence reigned, but only for a brief moment. The whispers surged and fell, like a grim tide drawing closer. She glanced back at where she felt the presence of her companions linger earlier. What if she chose poorly? What if they were watching from the yawning abyss, waiting for her to make a fatal mistake? Yet, she couldn't leave them behind, not without knowing their fate. Once more, she took measured steps toward the alley. Shadows clawed at her pants, as if trying to snag and hold her back. Each step felt heavier, time stretching as the air around her thickened with apprehension. Someone is down there. The words escaped despite her fear. The shadows pulsed, shifting with her voice, as if they, too, anticipated her choice. Did she want to know the truth? She swallowed hard, a knot tightening in her stomach as she moved closer to the murky depths of the alley. Her flashlight flickered as she turned it on, casting a trembling beam into the veil of darkness. "Dr. Malik? Dr. Lee?" she called, voice echoing back to her in mocking tones. Nothing answered but the whispering shadows. Just then, the chilling sound of laughter pierced the air, high-pitched and predatory, echoing all around her. Goosebumps erupted across her skin. "Choose," the voices taunted, growing in strength as they enveloped her. A choice. Sarah was about to confront the abyss, face whatever lay hidden in the shadows, and she knew in that moment that the truth could either save them or destroy her. With her heart hammering wildly, she stepped forward into the darkness, the shadows swirling around her ankles like smoke. "Wait," she yelled again, hoping to draw attention. "I will help. I'm coming for you." But laughter rang again, cold and dispassionate. Just as Sarah felt an unmistakable chill creep against her back. Something was behind her. She hesitated, her gaze flickering back into the dark alley, and then it struck a fleeting realization. What if confronting the horror meant more than she had bargained for? The realization flooded her with dread even as she turned to face what hunted her. The darkness grew deeper, and the whispers grew louder. What would she see? Would she find her friends or awaken something worse? The shadows pressed tightly around Sarah as she spun to face the looming darkness, her heart pounding so hard it felt as if it would burst from her chest. Each shallow breath tasted of fear, and she fought the urge to bolt down the alley. The laughter echoed again, mingling with the whispers that seemed to wrap around her like a cold blanket. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice cracking, challenging the unknown. A low hiss answered from the darkness, slithering through the air with an almost liquid quality. She shut her eyes for a moment, trying to regain her focus. Open her eyes, she would tell herself. Find your friends. But the weight of dread pressed against her, urging her to stay still, to disappear into the blackness. "Please," the girl's voice floated back, trembling and vulnerable. "I'm scared." Sarah felt the tether of sympathy tugging at her heart. She took a shaky step deeper into the alley, feeling braver than she was. The flashlight flickered again, casting fleeting shadows of twisted shapes that danced as if in mockery. But as she moved, the shadows shifted and stretched, chasing after her with a malevolent hunger. She hurried her pace. "Is anyone here?" She wanted to be loud but couldn't. The silence around her became more oppressive, wrapping like a vice around her thoughts. That laughter erupted again, breaking the quiet, rolling over her like thunder. It had real weight, a sinister gravitas that sent a fresh wave of icy terror crawling up her spine. A feeling of being watched, studied, filled the air. Sarah, the whisper was close now. "Dr. Malik? Dr. Lee?" she called back, desperation in her voice. And then, slipping under her breath, "Please, don't let this be the end." The air grew heavy, as if the atmosphere itself awaited her decision. Shadows stirred, forming grotesque figures that stared into her very being, their eyes pools of darkness punctuating the slim rays of light from her flashlight. "Help me," came a breathy plea from just ahead, the familiar voice pulling her further in. "You must choose or we'll be lost forever." She hesitated. Hungry images of her friends flashed in her mind, their laughter, their warmth. The thought of them caught somewhere in this hellish void spurred her forward, and she pushed deeper, the flashlight trembling in her grip. Suddenly, a cold wind surged past her, chilling her bones. The laughter twisted into a cackle, almost mocking. The shadows thickened, coalescing into figures that were unmistakably human, yet distorted and grotesque, their mouths stretched into sinister grins. "Join us," one figure whispered, reaching out with a skeletal hand. "It's easier to accept the darkness, no," Sarah screamed, stepping back, feeling the edges of panic ignite in her chest. "I have to find them." Choose, the chorus of voices crescendoed, groaning and echoing against the brick walls, pressing in around her, almost suffocating. Each shadow grew bolder, filling the alley with their cacophony. Images swirled in front of her eyes, her friends caught in agony. Twisted by the darkness, she hesitated to confront. The fear of losing them ignited a fierce spark inside her. She had to push through. "Not today," she yelled, gritting her teeth as she grasped her flashlight tightly, forcing herself forward. She was the only one left to confront the nightmares, and if she was going to save anyone, she had to face it head-on. But just as she resolved to move forward, she felt a breath on her neck, one that wasn't her own. "Are you ready for the truth?" Her heart sank. Something had breached the fragile barrier of her courage. The darkness roared around her, eager to consume. And just as she turned to confront it, everything went black. All went silent until, through the stillness, she heard sobbing. "What do you want?" Sarah whispered into the void, knowing the answer would change everything. Would she find her friends or become another lost soul trapped in this horror? The silence suffocated Sarah, thick and unnerving, like a heavy fog. She strained to hear through the darkness, the echo of soft sobbing pulling her deeper into the void. "Is someone there?" she called, her voice trembling, searching for a lifeline in the inky blackness. The sobbing stopped abruptly, replaced by an overwhelming stillness that sat heavily in the air. "Help me please." The voice was faint, trembling, a soft wisp of despair that floated around her. It was familiar, yet twisted in a way that made her stomach churn. "Jessica?" she breathed, instinctively moving towards the sound. "Is that you?" As she moved, shadows danced, weaving in and out of her periphery. The flashlight flickered again, sending a pulse of light that briefly revealed the horror around her, flickering glimpses of warped faces contorted in agony, mouths silently screaming. "Choose," they mouthed simultaneously, their expressions morphing into grotesque, mirrored reflections of her terror. Sarah shook her head, grit spilling into her voice. "I want tea. I need to save my friends." The darkness responded, thickening as if it were alive, a predator encroaching on its prey. The sobbing began again, low and mournful, rising from what felt like the darkest pit of despair. Sarah, the choked whisper slithered between the shadows, pulling at her heart. "You can't save them, not unless you join us." She held the flashlight out, refusing to be swallowed by the shadows. "I want tea, let you take me." Suddenly, something icy gripped her wrist. She yanked away, but not before feeling a frigid caress seeping into her skin, a connection that chilled her to the bone. "Why do you fight?" A voice hissed, seductive yet sinister. "The truth awaits you if you only close your eyes." "Get away from me," she shouted, the spark of her defiance lighting a flicker of hope in the heavy gloom. But deep inside, doubt slithered around her thoughts, whispering betrayals, reminding her of the confines of fear she struggled against. Suddenly, a pair of eyes glinted in the faint light, bright and piercing. They were familiar yet impossibly foreign. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the shadows shifted, and Dr. Malik stepped forward, his face distorted, eyes wide with warning yet filled with a despair she had never seen in him before. "Sarah," he cried, extending his hand. "You need to come back, it's too late for us." "No," she screamed, the panic igniting into a wildfire inside her. "Fight. We can fight it together." But he merely shook his head, the laughter from before rising again, frantic and echoing, making her heart pound louder. Around her, shadows writhed, their laughter becoming an overwhelming cacophony. Join us," they chanted, their voices a dissonant symphony of anguish. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the horrifying sights and sounds. "No," she cried out, squaring her shoulders. "I won't turn my back on them. I'm not afraid." The ground beneath her trembled, a discontented growl reverberating. As the shadows lunged, she felt a warmth her flashlight still flickered, a last bastion of light. With every ounce of strength, she opened her eyes, prepared to confront anything that came at her. As the darkness split apart, revealing a path, she heard that same gut-wrenching cry again, this time echoing from different directions. It was a chorus of desperate pleas, all weaving together into a singular, resounding truth. Picking her way through, she chanted a mantra in her head. "I will find them. I will save them." But as she edged forward, something in the shadows changed. The laughter twisted into a growl, like a beast waiting for its turn to strike. The walls felt closer now, as if the alley was alive with spite, constricting her with every step. But when she turned the next corner, everything she thought she knew would unravel into a new nightmare. What truly lay at the end of this corridor? And could she still save her friends? Or was she destined to join the chorus of lost souls? Sarah pressed onward, her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. The path before her twisted and turned, a living entity that shifted underfoot. Faint echoes of Jessica's voice clawed at her consciousness, pulling her deeper into the nightmare. A desperate scream erupted from the shadows to her right, sending chills coursing down her spine. "Sarah!" The cry resonated, raw and unrestrained, a haunting plea that reverberated through the corridor. "Help me, Jessica!" she shouted back, urgency lacing her voice. The name hung in the air, thick and heavy, as she fought against the creeping despair, willing her feet to move faster. A flicker of light illuminated a shape ahead. Small and hunched, it crouched against the wall. "Sarah," it was Dr. Malik again, his face shrouded in shadow. "You shouldn't be here." "What do you mean?" Panic turned her voice brittle. "Where are the others?" "Jessica needs me. You can't save them." His voice was laced with sorrow. "They're gone. Gone." The word struck like a knife, twisting in her gut. Sarah swallowed hard, rejecting the overwhelming tide of grief that threatened to drown her. "No, they're still here. They have to be." Then she saw it. The darkness behind Dr. Malik began to shift, swirling like a storm. Eyes peeked out, countless reflections of her deepest fears. "Sarah, join us," they whispered in unison, pleading yet threatening. The shadows enclosed tighter, a tight grip that constricted her lungs. "Leave him alone," Sarah yelled, raising her flashlight defiantly. But the light felt feeble, a flickering candle against a tempest. "Get away." Malik's features twisted, morphing into a grotesque mask of torment. "Open your eyes, Sarah." The truth. He extended a hand, but it was marred with shadows that clawed at her, reaching out toward the light. I want to believe you," she screamed, backing away, her flashlight slipping in her grip. A sickening crack sounded as her light fell to the floor, extinguished. The darkness engulfed them, swallowing Malik's horrified expression. The whispers grew louder, an avalanche of anguish that crashed into her, threatening to crush her spirit. Sarah, the voices became a symphony of torment, each note stabbing her consciousness, despair intertwined with mocking laughter. "Sarah, join us." She curled in on herself, feeling small and powerless amidst the shadows. A terrible doubt crept into her mind. What if they were right? What if it was all for nothing? But then she thought of Jessica, of their laughter and friendship, of all the moments they shared. "No," she howled, shaking her head violently. "I won't let you take me." The ground trembled again, a deep growl as something massive pushed against the walls of the alley. A flicker of light returned, a ghostly white illuminating more shadows. A dark shape loomed, tall and monstrous, exuding an aura of utter malevolence that made her heart race. Sarah realized, through the creeping dread, that the creature's eyes mirrored her own terror, raw and desperate. But now it was not just her fear it fed upon. It urged her to surrender. With a surge of adrenaline, she sprinted past Dr. Malik, past the anguished faces trapped in the darkness, whispering for her to join their ranks. "I'm not afraid," she screamed at the shadows, each step pushing back the gloom that threatened to engulf her. But just as she rounded the final corner, her path to escape rippled like water beneath her feet. The shadows shuddered, folding inwards, crushing her options. The flickering light revealed a door, a solid, heavy barrier against the lurking horrors, but it was far from safety, tainted by the gnawing silence behind it. What lay beyond? Was it a sanctuary, or the darkest pit of despair? And as the creature behind her roared, sending shards of fear slicing through her flesh, Sarah took a trembling step toward the door. Could she endure whatever lay behind? Or was it too late to turn back? The door loomed larger as Sarah approached, its wood dark and scarred, as if it had weathered more than just time. Her breath hitched in her throat, each exhale thick with dread. The overpowering scent of decay wafted toward her, a reminder of the darkness that pursued her. Ignoring the mounting urge to flee, she gripped the handle, fingers slick with sweat. It felt ice-cold against her palm, a stark contrast to the warmth of her pulse racing inside her head. With a shaky inhale, she turned the knob and pushed the door open. A rush of stale air washed over her, smelling of mold and despair. The room inside was dimly lit, remnants of flickering fluorescent lights casting long shadows that danced like specters across the cracked walls. Broken machinery lay scattered like discarded bones, evidence of a bygone time. Her eyes darted around, searching for signs of life or of Jessica. "Jess," she called out, her voice cracking. Silence hung heavily, thick like fog. Just then, a small noise pulled her attention to a pile of debris in the corner. It rustled softly, and instinct kicked in. She edged closer, heart pounding. There, half hidden beneath tattered cloth, a glimpse of familiar blonde hair surfaced. "Jessica?" Sarah crouched down, frantic urgency propelling her forward. She brushed aside the refuse, pulling away the heavy weight. Jessica's eyes fluttered open, wide and glistening with tears. "Sarah," she gasped, her voice hoarse and shaky. "You found me." Relief washed over Sarah, but a dark shadow crossed Jessica's features. "Quick, you need to leave now." "Leave? I can't just. They're coming." Jessica's warning was a desperate whisper. The shadows, they hear everything. Before Sarah could process the words, the darkness around them thickened, surging forward like a tidal wave. Echoes of laughter mingled with whispers, a cacophony of despair that filled the room, inching closer. The suffocating gloom curled around Sarah's ankles, pulling her back, urging her to retreat. "Jessica, we have to get out." Sarah pulled at her friend, urgency surging through her limbs, but Jessica remained rooted, frozen in fear. "No, they will give us what we want," she murmured, eyes glassy, drifting further into the abyss of whispers. "The truth," came a haunting voice from the shadows, distinctly Malik's. "You can't escape, Sarah. It knows your fears." "No." Sarah pressed her palms against her ears, battling the clawing voices. "I want to listen." Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, casting the room into chaos as the shadows entwined like serpents, pressuring the walls. The floor beneath them quaked, splintering under their feet. "Sarah," Jessica cried, breaking out of her stupor. "We need to go now." But the shadows lunged, luminous yet sinister, wrapping around Jessica, pulling her into their depths. "Help me," she screeched, her voice turning into an echo of despair as her figure blurred, overwhelmed by the darkness. "No." Sarah lunged, but it was too late. The shadows swallowed her friend whole, leaving no trace behind. The screams faded into the silence, leaving Sarah alone with nothing but her frantic breaths. Despair rose inside her, but she couldn't afford to succumb to it. The door she entered through slammed shut, sealing off her escape. A sick sense of foreboding washed over her as she spun around, ready to face the suffocating void behind her. "Embrace your fate," Sarah the shadows taunted, as a dark figure materialized just beyond the last flickers of light. Panic seized her, a palpable dread clawing at her throat. "I want tea," she shouted defiantly, adrenaline propelling her legs into motion once more. There had to be another way. She bolted down the hall, searching blindly for an exit. But with every turn, The shadows seemed to anticipate her moves, corralling her deeper into their oppressive grasp. As she barreled toward the next doorway, an idea flickered, desperate yet alive. What if it wasn't the end? What if she could control them instead? But the growls grew louder, the laughter more sinister. Was she strong enough to fight back? Desperation filled her chest as she pushed against the oncoming tide of darkness. In this twisted game of survival, was she the hunter or the hunted? And just as it seemed she would be lost to the void, a glint caught her eye, a mirror hanging crooked on the wall, reflecting back the terror that nested in her heart. Just maybe, she whispered, staring into her own frantic gaze. Could her own fears hold the key to a way out, or would they lead her to a fate worse than shadows? The shadows surged around Sarah as she stood before the mirror, its cracked surface reflecting her wild eyes and frantically rising chest. The darkness clawed at her heart, attempting to pull her into despair. What if confronting her fears could reshape her fate? Heart pounding, she stepped closer, her breath fogging the glass. "Face me," she whispered, nodding her resolve. The voices roared louder around her, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she allowed herself to feel every ounce of fear choking her breath, every doubt suffocating her thoughts. She wouldn't turn away this time. The mirror shimmered, rippling like water. "Embrace the shadows, Sarah. Join us." "No," she shouted, her voice echoing against the walls, defiance reigniting a fire within her. "You don't control me." With a fierce determination, she pressed her hands to the glass. A rush of energy surged through her, sparking images of the laughter of her friends, their smiles breaking through the overwhelming tide of darkness. "Jessica, Malik, I will not let you take me." The shadows recoiled, almost startled. She held steady, eyes locked onto the reflections of her terrified self morphing into something resolute, something fierce. "Choose, Sarah," they beckoned, their tone shifting between whispers and hisses of disdain. "Choose this," she screamed, her voice a whip crack against the suffocating laughter. "I choose to fight." The mirror pulsed, sending shockwaves of light cascading through the air, illuminating the darkness that had wrapped around her like a cloak. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from the light pouring forth. "Let them go," Sarah commanded, channeling every ounce of emotion into a beam of brilliant energy that shot through the cracks and fissures in the mirror's surface. "You cannot touch me." In an instant, translucent figures began to emerge from the shadows. The distorted faces of her friends flickered to life alongside the children and patients trapped within St. Benedict's hospital. They reached for her, mouths moving silently as if trying to communicate, terrified yet hopeful. "I see you," Sarah affirmed, stepping further into the light. "You're not lost. You're not alone." The shadows writhed violently, struggling against the radiance. Almost instinctually, darkness lashed out, clutching at Sarah's ankles. But she pressed on, painting the walls with pulses of glowing warmth. She felt connections with those lost, felt the threads of their despair stitching her heart together, urging her on until their voices harmonized into one compelling chorus. "Sarah." Their voices rose, threading the air, becoming a symphony stronger than the darkness. "We're here. I'm coming," she cried, resolve surging through her veins like molten lava. With each step forward, she felt the shadows dissipating, the cold grip loosening its hold as the forgotten souls began to reclaim their light. They surged past her, away from the suffocating darkness whispering lies of despair. The oppressive air lifted as Sarah stepped through the shimmering portal that had formed in the mirror's surface, bright light erupting around her like fireworks. The shadows shattered with a final, anguished cry, splinters of darkness evaporating into the air. As light flooded in, Sarah found herself back in the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic returning like a long-lost friend. Around her, the break room glowed, free of shadows. The clock read dawn. Dr. Malik and Dr. Lee stood nearby, their faces pale but real. The child was there too, eyes wide yet full of hope instead of darkness. "How?" Dr. Lee stammered, voice trembling. "I chose to fight," Sarah replied, voice steady as she glanced around, reflecting the weight that had lifted from her shoulders. I will always fight for what's right. The figures surrounding her shimmered, and with a flash, they were free, with their smiles beaming back at her. Each face bore witness to the eternal struggle between light and dark, fear and courage. Let us go, Sarah urged her colleagues, a new strength coursing through her. They exchanged relieved glances, fear replaced by the dawning realization that together, they had found resilience, their own version of hope and healing. As they stepped into the light of a new day, Sarah turned back as the hospital's remnants receded into the shadows. The spirits of the lost were finally at peace, their plight no longer forgotten. Take care of each other, she whispered to the fading echoes. You will always be remembered. With that, she pushed forward, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that even in the darkest hours, she could shine brighter. And now, to all of you who've experienced this journey with us, this is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. Don't wait even one more second to share this captivating story with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.